We're going to continue on here with the racing over the years and that. This here would be the racing year of 1980. So in 1979, around Thanksgiving, again, new bikes come out. Get my new bike, which would have been a 1980, the release model for that, for the 1980 racing season. So the picture there on the left, that is Dave Clausen standing right behind my bike. I think his bike is back behind that. That there would have been in Cocoa Beach, Florida. The picture to the right there is the start at St. Petersburg Sunshine Speedway in Florida as well. Don't know if you can tell, but right where the, I'll try to point this out, right here at the tip of this pen, there's a little arrow, and that would have been me on the start. That would have been at, again, Sunshine Speedway, the Florida Winter Am Series down there. And part of the reason I'm putting Dave in this picture is Dave just passed away this last year, which would have been in 1983. He had passed, died from leukemia, pretty sudden death. And Dave had helped me a lot over the years, getting to the races and traveling together and that. So I had already covered that in a prior video, so I won't go too much into it, but I just thought kind of fitting, shows my new bike, also has a picture of Dave in there, so I was just using that photo for this one. So anyway, 1979, it's the end of 79, probably December or so, somewhere in there. Dave got rid of his pickup truck with the camper and the smaller trailer, and has now pictured a van, which was outfitted inside. It was finished off inside. People used to do that with the vans back then. You'd have a seating area, bent, carpeted, a bed in there, stereo system, the whole bit. So got the van. He just felt that would be better for traveling, for doing the mileage than with the camper and that, like we had been doing. And he also purchased it was a 14-foot, I think, a Wells Cargo enclosed trailer. Had the side door and side, had a rollout awning on the side and that. Pretty nice. When you pulled up to the races and that, you could put out the awning, had a place to put your bike underneath out of the rain or hot sun or whatever. And inside we outfitted it, had a refrigerator, small refrigerator or ice box in the front, closet, cabinets for storage space, pretty good sized workbench in there with the vise, everything. We always carried my one tool chest, so we had a full set of tools, everything in there, nitrogen tanks for the forks and that, air tanks. It's pretty well outfitted for racing. So anyway, that was going to be the pretty much the rig for the year that would be traveling in the van with the enclosed trailer. Again, that was Dave's, and that would be Dave Clausen. So anyway, around December or so, I'm assuming it was. I know it was in the winter. He had brought the trailer, come up to my parents, and my dad had a radial arm saw and different stuff, so we'd back the trailer up to the garage because we had a little bit of heat in the garage, and we were building the cabinets and everything and just redoing, or not redoing, completely outfitting the interior of that trailer. We had done that earlier that year. Then Christmas, New Year's comes around, turns to 1980 of that year. So we had built up that trailer and everything, had the new rig to go, and we were going to, later in that year, at that point in time, you had your, the races around here we would go to and that, but in Florida, they held, it was called the Winter, I believe it was like Winter AMA, or they called it AM Series. It was somewhat an extension. Outdoors around here, you had the 120, 125, 250, 500 Pro Nationals. That would start in the spring months, possibly out in California, and they would run the whole travel around the United States. That series would move from California to back here to the East Coast and all around. That was the Pro Nationals, but then come winter, which would be January and February at that time, there wasn't a whole lot of racing for on the professional level there. So they started this Winter AM Series. So you could go to Florida then, down there in Florida, and run this series, which would primarily, if I recall right, it was an 8-race series. It would start beginning of January, so they would do the 4 weeks of January, 4 weeks of February. And so, and it wasn't near as popular as, like, say, your outdoor nationals, but it was just whoever showed up. The factories weren't quite as involved into this, but you could get, they would have, like, Bob Hanna would show up, you know, not all the time. He may show up. At that time, I remember David Bailey being there. David Bailey, at that point in time, was still an amateur. I don't know that he was even into the pro ranks yet, or he may have been running pro, but he wasn't factory or anything then. You just had riders from all over the United States would show up there for this Florida Winter Am Series. It was warm down there. You could race yet in the winter. So that was the event. But primarily the 125 250 class and the open in the pro class would have been a mix. You know, there may be 1 or 2 factory riders and the rest would be, say, all your local A guys that's making up the rest of the class. But it was their Pro-Am series. And I guess a lot of those guys, even though they were your local A riders, may have held pro licenses as well. But anyway, and I do remember that I believe it was probably this year, 1980, when Gary Postolic from Erie, PA, District 5 rider, raced around here all the time, won the overall championship down there. He was the #1 plate in that Winter Am series of that year. Not positive, but I think that may have been 1980 that he had done that. So anyway, so it's coming around. So this here's very first race of the year for me, I guess, and Dave, would have been in Florida that year. And also I'll make mention too, I guess there was Rick Amos, who was another friend of mine. He was in the VOTEC class, went to Lakeview School District. Also raced a little bit in that, but he was from Lakeview. He was a year ahead of me in school. So in 1980, I would have been a senior in high school. Rick was also in my VOTEC class, but he was a grade ahead, so he had just graduated that year. So it was me, myself, Dave Clausen, and Rick Amos. We're going to Florida then, racing, going down there. And yes, it was in the middle of the school year, but things were a little bit different back then in the way of, like, at the school, all the teachers knew, you know, that I was racing and that. You'd come to school on Mondays or whatever, or whenever, and they'd ask you how you did, things like that. So the teachers and faculty and that was well aware of what I was doing in that. So for whatever reason, they gave me a dismissal. Let me, because they knew we were going down there racing. Not sure they knew that it was just the 3 of us younger guys going, or whether they thought parents were along too or what. But anyway, they gave me a permission to leave school, take time off during the school year. I don't recall having to make it up or anything like that, just that I do remember having to go, like, to guidance or the principal and into the office and that, and have a little meeting with them and that. But anyway, I was given permission to go. So we leave for Florida. We skipped January, or didn't get down there probably till the end of January, because I see the very first race of that year was February 2nd, 1980, and that was at St. Petersburg, Florida. The track was called Sunshine Raceway. It was one of the Florida Winter AM series. I was running the 125 class. I believe Dave for sure was running 250. So in that, just like your nationals and that, you had to qualify to make it in. You didn't just jump right to the main. They would run qualifiers and narrow it down. And I believe they could only take 40 on the starting gate. And I have a note here, there was 51 bikes in the to qualify in that. Anyway, I'm not quite sure how that worked, because they would have run 2 separate gates of bikes qualifying it down. and you had to make top 20 to make it into basically the main event. And again, this here would have been like a pro national in a way. Just not all the factories quite there sponsored. Anyway, my qualifier, you would run 2 motos to make it through. And I ended up with a 28th overall, so I did not make the cut to make the main event there. So first race of the year is over, and so we stay down there. We're just staying down there, and we were staying at there was a bike shop right off of US 1 by Cocoa Beach. Cocoa was another one of the national tracks down there. And Cocoa was basically, you crossed over US 1. There was like a little furniture store there or something. You'd ride through their parking lot. Down there is sand road. Around here they're dirt roads, but it was a sand road. Went down, caught another little blacktop. You didn't have to go very far. And right there was Cocoa Racetrack. So we're staying at the bike shop there behind a laundromat. They had a little area back there, kind of yard area, that the guys from all over that come there, they would basically camp there and stay there. There was a shower in the back of the motorcycle shop, just a single restroom type thing, but you could go up there and get a shower, get cleaned up. There was a laundromat right there and all. But we would stay there and we would go out and ride every day. Every single day we would go. We'd maybe go down there to Cocoa, to the moto track, and practice there, or just a little bit past the racetrack there at Cocoa was a power line crossed, and you could jump on there and we would go trail riding. And it was just like around here back then in Florida. You could ride everywhere, up by the Space Center, Kennedy Space, I think it was called Kennedy, it was in Titusville. We could ride all up through there. You could just go endlessly on trail riding there in Florida. Trail's quite different down there, very sandy, very whooped out. They would give you a real workout real quick, and the tracks there would be extremely rough. They would start out groomed very well in practice, but it didn't take long for that sand to get super whooped out. So we would stay there, and then we did a little bit of traveling around while we were down there. We went over to Disneyland. At that time, Epcot Center was just being built. But we went over there, spent a day there at Disney World, did that tour there. But primarily we would ride every day. We'd get up in the morning and we would basically head out riding, stop back in, grab just a little something for lunch, go back, refuel, back out riding, and we would do that all day. And then I remember too, there was a smorgasbord down there called Duff's. So we didn't eat a whole lot during the day, and every day at the end of the day, then that's where we ate. We would go up to Duff's, and just a flat fee at this buffet, and we would just sit there and eat and eat and eat and eat, and that would have to carry you through pretty much till the next day. That's how we were eating down there and staying in that. So anyway, staying in Florida. The next weekend was February 9th. Another one of the Winter Am Series, and this here one is in Orlando Sports Stadium. I don't know why they call it Sports Stadium. It was an outdoor track, but that was just the name of it. It was in Orlando, Florida. Again, you had to qualify to make the main there, and you had to make top 20 to make it into the main, and I had a 26, so I did not qualify for that one either. But great experience. We'd never ridden the sand before. The sand's a lot different riding than around here. I mean, the traction, the bike would just stick wherever you put it. But the big difference was the tracks got so whooped out. And I'll show some pictures here a little later of some of the tracks. They would get extremely rough. And when I mean whooped, the whoops were near as high as the bike, some of them, that you would go down in. They were almost like mini jumps. They would just roll in and out of, and the sand was like a deep, soft sand, so it was very washy. It wasn't like some of the tracks down there could be more gravelly in that, but these, both Orlando and Sunshine, were very sandy, deep, soft sand. There was another track there called, I believe it was like Biffalo or Bithalo, something like that. which we did go over there practice, and some we didn't do any races over there, but we would go over there. You could ride that one also as a practice track during the week. So, got one other little short story here before I go into the rest, and this here would have been like back before Dave traded off that his camper and that. I just had a note here about, I remember a lot of times the night before the races and that, a lot of the guys, you were friends with a lot of these guys and that, so we would get together, and when Dave had the camper, and we'd go in there and play a game called Spoons. Now, I know Spoons a lot of times can be a drinking game in that, but since everybody was like really into racing during the racing season, we primarily weren't drinking in that, and especially this was the night before a race and stuff. So we would play the losers, or whoever lost in that game had to drink. We'd break a raw egg in a glass and you had to drink it. But just one of those unique little games, and I just kind of remembered that as a little story in that we used to do that quite a bit. So I'll continue on here. So we come back from Florida, because we were going out to Harrisburg then. We always did that arena cross in Harrisburg, which was now, this year's at the end of, towards the end of February, February 17th. So we'd already been racing a little bit, got a little bit of practice in, and this year was a little different for this year because primarily before that, your first race of the year, you hadn't been riding all winter. Because back here we had a lot of snow and that, you just didn't ride. And a lot of times your new bikes, you're starting out at the beginning of the year with hardly any time on them. So anyway, we're going to Harrisburg to that arena cross. And we go down there, but just getting back from Florida, been riding for the, the past month, primarily down there. Had a lot of riding time in, some practice and that, so we go to Harrisburg. This would have been the third race of the year. I'm running the 125A class. And in there you have to qualify to make the main event. Main event Saturday night. That's when they let the general admission in. Qualifiers go during the day. And then they'll let the general public in that night for spectating and that in their stadium area of it. So during the day you do your qualifiers and that. Qualified, made it into the main event. And so main event Saturday night, I pulled the whole shot and led every lap. I led that from the beginning to the end, took the first overall down there. So very good results, but then too some of that could be that some of the guys back here probably hadn't had much riding time in. We just come back and been riding for the past month and that down there. So the following weekend, March 16th, this would be the first race, probably District 5 now back here more locally. Track called Rocky Ridge. We go down to that. I got a note here and there. It was very muddy that day. And first moto, I took a 4th place there. So March 30th, we go to Harbor Woods. And this here is a national amateur qualifier down there. And not sure, I got a note here they were running longer laps there too. Had 40 bikes that day, so it was a full gate. First moto I had a 14th, and second moto, not sure what happened, but I was in, took a 20th. So not too bad first moto, for being an amateur qualifier, but second moto the 20th. That's basically mid-pack. Finished there. The following weekend, April 6th, we go to Shippingport, PA. This here is a track called Green Acres. So first moto I had a 6th, second moto I had a 4th. The following weekend we're going to High Point. This is also a national amateur qualifier. And they had 48 bikes, so they run a qualifier. there. You had to qualify to make the main. Because too many bikes, again, they can only do 40 on the start. So you had to qualify down in that. National Amateur Qualifier. First moto I had a 19th. Second moto I wrecked, but still ended up with an finish with an 18th in that moto. So a little better. The National Amateur Qualifiers would bring in a lot of riders from even other districts would come in that for those there. But so on then April 20th we go to Central PA. Not sure what the track is or anything really, or even where that's at. But that's another National Amateur Qualifier. Apparently we were doing the qualifiers then, these National Amateur Qualifiers, because they seem to be 1 week after the next here. So that one there took a 20th and a 14th. The following week, April 27th, we go to Pleasant Hills Recreational Park. This is in Glassboro, PA. And first moto, I had crashed in it. Took a 16th. Second moto, I had a 14th in that one. Again, this here was really my very first full year. 79 was split between the amateur and then turned into the expert class towards the end of that season. So 1980 is my very first year full-time for the A class. So some of the results, I guess, are kind of showing too, you know, especially for the amateur qualifiers and that. So May 4th, we go to, can't read my writing here, but it was in Knox, PA, something motorcycle club, Knox, PA. Another national amateur qualifier, had a 13th and a 12th there. Following weekend, yes. I must have skipped writing a lot of them because now we're clear into August. And I know my journal here, it ends shortly after 1980. Or even somewhere through here, I just, for some reason, quit writing down where we went in that. But so, skip a lot of the summer then. Here we go. Now we're in August 10th, going to Harbor Woods. And this is the weekend Chappie Blouse, factory Kawasaki rider, shows up there. And I ended up taking a 4th, and I believe Chappie took 3rd there that day. Following weekend, August 12th, we're going to Lawrence County. And I guess this was their main event night there. First moto I had a 6th, second moto I took a 6th. Following weekend, August 17th, first moto I had a 6th, second moto I took a 3rd. Then we go August 24th to Yankee Lake. This here's over by Brookfield, Ohio. There was a track over there. There was an old lake, recreational lake, beach, everything over there. That they had drained the lake, and then that turned into a motocross track, was built in that area. I guess when I'm looking here for results, it just says seized bike. So I blew it up that weekend. Didn't race. I don't know whether it blew up first moto or what, but blew up the bike that weekend. And that would be the end of where I quit keeping this journal. So I have nothing for a few races then for 1980. I have nothing for 81, and then this journal picks up again in 82. I'm not sure why or how that happened. We're a lot of years later here, so I'm kind of, some of this I'm going off memory, but and from what I had written down records in that, but so my journal stops there. So in Florida, I guess, so I'll pick up just from some of my notes and some of what these photos have jogged in my memory in that. There was a rider called Kenny Keelan. who was a local rider down there in Florida during that Winter Am series, which Kenny was in all those races down to, I'm almost positive he was running the 125 class. He not sure on if he rode, because a lot of guys sometimes back then, even though it was pro classes and that, they would run two classes, maybe do the 125 and 250 or 125 and open, mix it up that bit. But Kenny Quilon later on earned a national ranking number, and I believe he also got a factory ride there with Honda. So another little interesting story, and I believe this was probably 1980. It was one of the times me and Dave, we would always go to Harbor Woods was one of our local tracks, really. Just Newcastle, PA, not that far away. But we would still go down there on Saturday afternoon sometime. We would head down there. And a lot of other people would come and camp there too. So everybody kind of had their own designated parking areas and that. Since we were getting there early, we could pick our own spots. Everybody parked as a group together down there. And there were some families in that, and the older people, we were just teenagers at that time, they would hang out around their campfires, do whatever, but us as kids or young guys at that time, we would always be finding something to go do. So there's some other local guys from there, Jeff Iorio, Leland Musquire, Mike Misko, sometimes Matt Manfredi, he would come down. Don't remember him really camping, but he might come down and just go screw around with us that evening or something, and then go back home and come back in the morning for racing and that. But so anyway, I know it was me, Dave, Mike Misko. I'm sure Leland was probably along. Don't remember who all else. So there's a go-kart track a couple miles from there, and this was a place, it was a paved track, and it was sort of like a road course, and they had tires all around that track. And us guys being, racing in that, and we'd get into some hard bumping and stuff in the carts, and usually whoever's working there would be, yelling at you, doing whatever. But so, and Mike comes up with an idea, hey, whenever they throw out the flag at the end of your time, just none of us, so it was already pre-planned, go back in, just stay out there, just keep going by the flagman. So we would do stuff like that, and usually by the end of the night, we might be getting kicked out of there or something or whatever. But so anyway, this particular night, we go to the go-kart track. A separate time from running that. And so we're jamming pretty hard in the carts and that. And one of us gets knocked into the tires at the side, runs their cart right up into the tires, sort of got the tires, one of the tires along the side stuck under their cart, and I come around there and just tagged the back end of that cart. Probably did it intentional, but it ended up it was young guys that worked there at the go-kart track, was in front of whoever it was. I don't know if it was Dave in that cart or Mike or who, but was trying to push him back off that tire. And when I tagged that cart in the back end, it just kind of knocked that cart and them right into this guy working. And I didn't know what happened to him, but he's on the ground. I know that. And the workers there are yelling and stuff, and so I get evicted out of the place. Not allowed back in there. So I go out to the van. Everybody else was staying. They're going to go racing carts yet. I guess it was me that hit the guy. So I'm the only one that gets kicked out. So I go out. I'm sitting in the van. And the van's parked up along this fence where you can see them in there racing and that. And they're continue on racing carts and that. So after a little bit, I'm sitting there and here comes the ambulance. And they haul this kid away that got hit. Apparently, I heard, or they said it broke his leg, which I did not do that intentionally. It was accident, but it was us just screwing around. So the ambulance comes, they load the kid up, they haul him away, and now I'm sitting out in the van, and these guys, all my friends, they're still in there riding in that. So I get this bright idea, well, hey, I'll just throw on a different shirt, put on a racing jersey or something, I don't know what, that I could find in the van there, put on a ball hat and a pair of sunglasses, and go back in. They won't know who I am. And so that's what I did, and it worked. They didn't recognize who I was. And so I got back in, and we continued on. But just a story that goes along with part of that race here and that some of the stuff that had happened. So I'll go over here now to the photo album and show some of the pictures in that from racing that year. Don't have a whole lot, but do got some. So in here, I'm going to try and find, if I can, some of the having trouble here locating some of the pictures I was going to show from Florida that year. Okay, this here, when I said we were staying there at Cocoa Beach, this here would have been the rockets in that up at Kennedy Space Center. So one of the days we took the van or whatever and took a little trip up there, and you could actually go in here to the Space Center, and they had like a museum and tour and that you could do around the rockets, and different stuff they showed from, you know, the building of the rockets and that, just a whole little museum there at Kennedy Space Center. So that was one of the things we did while we were down there. But like I said, the trails you could ride right up pretty close to this Space Center, up along US 1 there on the trail system and that we would ride to. So I'm not sure if this here was Tampa Bay. I just remember we were staying at Cocoa on the one side of the thing and traveling over to St. Petersburg. Would leave like the day before to go over there, and I remember, I think it was Tampa Bay, there was actually, you're going along on the highway and the basically a tunnel goes down under the bay. Instead of having like a drawbridge or anything, the tunnel goes down underneath the bay and comes up on the other side to allow the ships through and that. This photo here, that would have been my bike with the number 10 on it, and Dave, he was riding a Can-Am then. And that would have been the trailer, the race trailer, and that we traveled out of. This here would have been at one of the race tracks down there. You can kind of tell by the looks of how the motorhomes were back then. Kind of dates things a lot. Actually, even in the vans, when you look at the vehicles and that, you can tell that different time frame from now. There's the red van there. That was Dave's van. The bikes, the trailer. Apparently David crashed out there behind the trailer, sleeping in the middle of the day. This track here, I believe, was probably at Sunshine Speedway in Florida. This here was, I believe it was Kippy, I think it was Kippy Pierce, maybe, was the name. He rode for Team LOP, I think they were a suspension company at the time. Not sure who some of these different riders are. I think that might have been Kippy Pierce again. This here's back at Sunshine Speedway. I believe this picture here may have been, that may be David Bailey riding a Bultaco. His dad, David Bailey's dad, Gary Bailey, the professor, they owned a Bultaco dealership as well. I believe up in Axton, Virginia, possibly it was. But this here would have been, I believe that's David Bailey right there, clear back when he was running a Bultaco. David later, I believe he won a national title, but he was factory Honda at that time. These pictures here were from Cocoa Beach, the practice track we would go to. And I don't know if you can really tell from these pictures, but that gives you an idea of how whooped out the track would get. The deep sand, you can see the depth of them ruts. They weren't like ruts like you get around here back in PA. The ruts around here, when you get deep ruts, they're hard, they're formed and solid. Where in the sand's soft, so you can actually break through ruts in that. So it's just rutted, deep, soft sand. This here's another one from Cocoa. This here's actually an uphill. There's like a big rolling uphill that you would come up over, but it was just very deep, whooped out. I mean, when you'd be down in the bottom of them, you were almost, the depth of your bike was down in them. So the whole way around the track, it's just rolling in and out, in and out, in and out. Very tiring because you had to stand constantly. This next track, it's somewhere there in Florida. This other side, that was at Cocoa. This is the on the back downhill side. I know it looks kind of flat, but this was actually the downhill side of that rolling thing. So it'd be whooped out like that, going up and going down. And even the jumps, what was built as jumps, the jumps would have whoops up the face of the tours, almost like a pre-jump to a jump. And this is just practice day over there at, that was probably also at Cocoa. Not sure who the rider was there. Could have been, I believe there was a Frank and Andy Stacy. I kind of remember that they were down there the one time. Might have been one of them. Not sure who that is. Not even really sure why I took this picture or who took the picture that I got here of this. But it was just a, kind of gives you a dating of the vans, how the vans looked at that time. This would have been the staging area at one of the races as we're waiting to get staged. They would stage you to the starting gate and that, but they would have huge turnouts down there. This apparently is, maybe that's a Dave's start or something, not sure. This picture I don't remember, but to me that looks like Johnny Shea, but I don't remember if he was down there right then racing or not. But that picture really looks like it could have been Johnny Shea. Johnny Shea was a District 5 rider from around here. Also, I think Shea might have earned a national number of 13 at one time. I remember Shea more when he was riding his Honda, and he had the gas tank had a custom painting of Ted Nugent on a CR250 with Ted Nugent on it. That one was myself at Orlando Sports Stadium, start picture. That's when I had at one time Scott, you'd see the boots. They were a very hard plastic boot. And I had a pair of, that's what I was using at the time, was Scott boots, Fox jersey. That was probably clear back before I had full face helmets even. But the Scott boots were just very hard to get used to. They were so stiff that at times you'd be stepping down on the brake lever and not even realize that you're kind of dragging the brake as you're trying to go. Just could never get used to them boots and that. So I went back to more the traditional leather style, like high point boots at that time. These pictures here were just, this one here may have been, I'm guessing that's probably Kenny Keelan. As I remember, that's about how he looked. This one here is myself. Not sure what racetrack this was. Most of these pictures here were from Florida, racing down there, but I'm not sure what track that one was from. Another one, not even really sure. I believe that's probably Kentucky Lawn. This one here is a picture. This here is back at my parents' place. Right off the back of the garage, that's where in my workshop. That whole back part of the garage was my race shop or whatever. But this would be myself. And this probably was from 1980 as well. My brother, who had a Can-Am 250 there, the orange bike. And Donnie Clark, my cousin, on a little Yamaha 80 in this picture. So this video, it might be a little bit of a shorter video in comparison to some of the others that I have done, but I just don't have a lot of details and information then from the 1980 year beyond this, and in looking through some of the past stuff, because I'll be making another one here for 81. I'll separate that into a separate one, but I have very little information from that year, so a lot of that I'm gonna have to look back, see what I can find to continue on for the 81 year. I got a lot more in the later years, but for some reason 81 seems to almost be missing, even though that was a full race year, because I pick up again and got some for 82, but just kind of must have quit keeping records and stuff at that time, or quit keeping anything. So I'll pick up then, the next one will be picking up for the start of the 1981 year, and this here will conclude it for the 1980 year.